Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Aisha, and you're listening to the Defying Gravity Program podcast. If you're not subscribed, please go ahead and do that so you don't miss a single topic. Today's topic is called Unboxing Life. This is about possibility and imagination. Now, I can't tell you how many women tell me how undervalued they feel, how unhappy they are, how they want more, but for one reason or another, they can't really get what they want, or they think they can't get what they want. So today we have an interesting topic about possibility and imagination. Now, as we go through the topic, I want you to keep in mind that when I say things like future, change, effort, all of this is relative to our identity, our own identity. And we're not boxing up life. I'm actually unboxing this for you and saying all of this for just our lifetimes here while we walk on earth is incomplete. So does our life finish here? It doesn't. So whatever we do, whatever decisions we make, whatever things that we want, we should think about all of that with the perspective of forward thinking perspective. I mean that in its complete sense. We can't ignore our identity and say that life stops here in this world. So we have to be present and strategic about how we live our life, right? We have to make sure the pieces or segments of our lives that we're putting in place match with what we envision. And what kind of life do we want? What kind of hereafter do we want? And are we putting in place the pieces and parts that will support that vision? Are we creating that infrastructure, so to speak, for the kind of life that we want here and in the hereafter? So I'll give you an example of what I mean. I have 5 kids who absolutely love Legos, building blocks, I notice sometimes they plan how they want the pieces to fit together. They have some sort of strategy because they had a vision, they had an idea, they had something in their mind about what they wanted to create. And then sometimes they just put pieces together randomly. Sometimes it works out for them and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes we can plan how we want things to go if we have a clear vision. And sometimes despite that, things don't go as we planned and we have to improvise. We have to live life on the fly. We have to try another way. But trying another way, having to improvise, having to make changes doesn't mean failure. No. It means that we had to try a different approach. That doesn't mean failure. And this is where I tell people that life is not mathematics. Life is unpredictable. Math is predictable. Math is right or math is wrong, but life isn't. Okay? It's a continual evolving kind of thing. It's a transition from how we were born to how we're going to die, to how we're going to be raised up again. And so failure isn't failure until we accept that for ourselves. Okay, and we're not going to do that. It turns out that sometimes what we think is failure is actually success in the making, right? Isn't it so that Allah Ta'ala loves the people who do tawbah, right? The people who failed to do what they were supposed to do, for example. Yes? And that's because whenever we humble ourselves and realize that, okay, maybe it wasn't working out for us right now, but we can make some changes and have better luck, have better success, have a better outcome, then things will improve. So it turns out that that perceived failure could be success, or a source of success, could be a source of goodness, even if we don't see it. Sometimes failure is like a dark cloud over us. It covers up the reality, and we don't even realize it. So in a couple of podcasts before, I talked about focusing on the past, and I also talked about focusing on the future. I've talked about how important it is to be future focused. It's so important. We have to live here today, but we have to live here today in a way that is future focused, if that makes any sense at all. And I want to kind of reiterate that all of that here now stuff, right? It matters because it's how we're going to utilize it to build our future. So on the very basic level, most people are very past focused once they get over the age of 25. When you talk to most kids, you talk to teenagers or young adults, they're very future focused. Their lives seem much more exciting. They seem to be going places. They seem to have a wonderful momentum. And I think it's because we have plans for most people's future from that age on. And then once you get married or you have kids and life kind of settles in, you get a job, you get busy, there seems to be a trend towards starting to then use the past as a reference instead of using the future as a reference. And the material for you to build your future is not in your past. The material to build your future is in the future. And I know that seems crazy, but I want you to think about the possibility. So let's take an example to understand this. Imagine, we all used to live in a cave together. Remember that? But now we have houses, we have roads, we have cars, we have airplanes. But at the time, whenever we were back in the cave, we used to sit around a fire telling stories, right? So those things were impossible to have. It was impossible to go get a house. It was impossible to get on a plane and go somewhere. Those things didn't exist yet. So how did those things come into existence? Well, they certainly didn't look in the past and bring them into existence. They had an idea that developed in their mind, and they slowly got to where we are today. We couldn't have referenced our past to create those things. We couldn't have looked to, we haven't done that before, let's do more of that. We couldn't think like that because it wasn't done yet. We would just have to have more caves if that's all we can think of. We would just have to have more fires because we certainly wouldn't have stoves. We wouldn't have homes or cars or trains or planes and ships and things like that. I know this is a simplistic way of looking at it, but when you think about it, those ideas, those inventions, the way we evolved, that all came from our minds, human ingenuity, right? It came from our imagination. We imagined something better and something different than we had. And then we went on about creating it with no reference to our past to be able to do it, except that maybe we had a need. Maybe we had a desire in us to make a difference, to make something different, to make something change. I mean, it might have happened this way, that we were tired of getting splinters in our feet after, having to run from lions and tigers and stuff. So maybe somebody said, hey, we need some better shoes. So maybe shoes got invented that way. I don't know. I've never researched that. But it's a possibility that out of necessity, someone thought of something. Somebody had an imagination. Imagine, if we have to run from animals, what if we had better shoes? Maybe that would help us. So imagine us back in the cave. Let's say, hey, let's design something better than this. Let's design better shoes. Let's design better fires. Let's create better caves. Had we thought, well, we don't know how to do that because we've never done that before. We don't know how to reference that because we've never done that before. We would just sit there in our cave with our fire and we wouldn't be here doing a podcast on the computer, right? It's true. So when you look at most people's lives, this is what they do. Right? They look in the past, right? Instead of looking forward. And you'll talk to them like in 10 years from now. And, those same people who look in the past and didn't look in the future, nothing will have changed for them. They might have rearranged some ideas in their life, but everything is pretty much the same because they forgot to start looking into their future with their imagination of what is possible. Now, the imagination, the idea of what was possible at that moment became possible because we evolved towards it. We were forward thinking. And that is how you have to think about your own life. That doesn't make something impossible just because you've never done it before. The iPhone was impossible before it was created. Everything was unfathomable until it became fathomable. Everything was non-existent until it exists. So when you think about that and you start making friends with that, make friends with impossible. You start making friends with your imagination. You start making friends with bigger goals, and then you ask yourself how to do it. And you have no idea, by the way, because you haven't done it before. So you have to think, you have to use your brain. And your brain will say, try this and try that. And if it doesn't work, it's not failure. It just means you need to try a different way. Right? Eventually you'll learn. But you'll learn by doing, not learn by just imagining. You have to do it. You use your brain and you do it. You end up creating that way. You end up changing that way. You end up putting things together in your life. And you couldn't have imagined that before until you started trying. This is how it works. But we forget that, yeah? We have to do it. How are you going to do it? Remember the spin cycle model? If you haven't seen that podcast, go to my channel and listen to that. Thoughts create feelings, and feelings are passionate. Feelings ignite action. Right? Those create actions, and depending on how you feel and how you think, then actions yield, and actions create results. So essentially, your thoughts create the results, right? If you want to have results that you've never had before, then you have to think thoughts that you never thought before. I hope that makes sense. If not, go back and listen to that podcast, but that's it in a nutshell. So we need to live from our future selves. We need to think about what we want our life to be in the future and start putting those pieces into motion right now. Right? We're those kids. We're my kids sitting there on the floor with the Legos. We're those kids, right? We're putting our blocks together, imagining how we want it to look when we're done. Start putting blocks together now. Put those pieces in place. Now, I want to leave you with one thing. Everyone was created in a very special way. Everyone is unique. And everybody has a special, unique purpose. A special reason for being on this earth. So that means we have different lives to lead. Someone else may have been meant to do something else or something different from you in their life. And they may be contributing in a different way. We all have our strengths to work from. But one piece of advice, stay in your lane. Live in your own skin. Stay focused on what's possible and impossible for you. Be that person you long to be because that's what's going to make you happy. Be the person you were meant to be because that's what's going to make you happy. We have a core identity as a Muslim, but that does not box us up. Rather, that actually unboxes life for us. And just try to give that some thought. What does that mean for you? That our identity unboxes life for us. Okay? Our identity as a Muslim unboxes life for us. Okay, dear sisters, inshallah, I'll see you in the next episode. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help you and guide you into being the best version of yourself and grant the best of both worlds. Ameen.